Why a Lancia Stratos? Bloody good question. Of all the cars I could have fallen in love with, why was it this one? Well, obviously age has something to do with it, and I'm a child of the 60s, and so cars in the mid-70s were kind of my era. And honestly, a pretty bleak era of that all round, economically and car-wise, especially in the UK. Some of these gems. Exotic car-wise, there were some special ones out there for sure. The Countach, the Berlinetta Boxer from Ferrari, loved those. All very wedgy, which is kind of a Marmite thing. You either like wedges or you don't. We'll come back to that later. But why this wedge in particular? Well, that's not a very good start, is it? It's all open, doesn't look very wedgy at all. It looks more like a clam. Anyway, a big fan of the wedge, hence a couple of TR7s and an X19, which was about as close as I was going to get to a Stratos in my early 20s. Oh yes, and of course, my Lotus Esprit. Less said about that, the better, eh, Rob? And obviously the X19 was about as close as you could get. It was Bertoni designed. It had mid-engine. And although horribly underpowered, it was still a lot of fun to drive. And I think I said before, I recorded my fastest time from London to Wales, which was exactly 3 hours. And the mileage was 240 miles. So, yeah, averaging 80 miles an hour, which is pretty impressive with a car that's top speed is probably like 110 if you're lucky. Anyway, enough about Fiat. Why the Stratos was the question. Well, probably because it wasn't just another supercar, for want of a better word. It wasn't a poster child. It wasn't a Ferrari. It wasn't a Lamborghini, blah, blah, blah. It certainly wasn't a Porsche. It was designed for purpose. It was basically a race car. It had the most ridiculous mechanisms for doing functions. It had door pockets big enough to fit a crash helmet. The whole interior was relatively sparse, but functional. But kind of more than that, it looked like nothing else. It was a bit different, a little odd even. Well, I've always been a bit odd, as you've probably worked out by now. And that probably explains why they didn't sell in big numbers. They made less than 500, which was just enough for the homologation. And they struggled to sell them to the public. They didn't struggle to sell them to other race teams, because basically if you didn't have a Stratos, you didn't stand a chance. I do wonder how many of the original 483, 93, I can't remember now. Anyway, I do wonder how many of those still survive, given that a lot of the race teams did stuff like this in them. And talking of survival, thankfully I survived long enough to be in a position to order a Lister Bell Stratos of my own. And of course that's another reason for wanting a Stratos in the first place. There's not many vehicles you can own and drive that have such a racing pedigree. Of course, by today's standards, it's not blisteringly quick. It doesn't have a sub 3 second 0 to 60 time. Certainly wouldn't hit 200 miles an hour. But it'd probably still hang with the best of them around the bends, especially the tight ones. And that has a lot to do with that crazily short wheelbase, measuring at just 88 inches, which means it snaps around the corner. Of course, the originals had the wonderful Ferrari Dino motor, that beautiful sounding V6, and a lot of the modern replicas have an Alfa V6. This is the 12 valve. I think in the UK the 24 valve is more popular. It has pop-up headlights. I love pop-up headlights. Now extinct, of course, thanks to US regulations. And of course there's that amazing front windscreen, which kind of looks like some kind of fighter jet. And when you're inside, it gives you great visibility, as well as a real sense of occasion when you're driving the car. It has that fabulous 1970s louvered back end. Doesn't get more 70s than that, does it? Of course, those beautiful coffin spoke wheels. These particular ones could do with a clean. So that's pretty much the why. Perhaps one of the nicest looking wedge-shaped cars from the 70s, and yet in so many ways function over form in the fact that it was designed and built to win rallies. Small and remarkably nimble, and just a lot of bloody fun to drive, honestly. So what about the how and the who? Well, let's start with the who, because that's a short answer, because it's basically a choice of two. There's, of course, Hawk Cars, who started building these cars way back in the 80s, I think, or even the 70s. I've had the honour and pleasure of meeting Jerry himself. What a lovely chap. Being the fiberglass expert he is and was at the time, he fixed my TVR Griffith when I gently nudged a Mini into a roundabout. Of course, there's Craig and the Lister Bell, or LB Specialist Cars as they are now known. I can't honestly remember how I arrived at the decision, but I ended up going with a Lister Bell car. Without wanting to upset either party, I think there's very little to choose between the two. They're both finely built cars. And so to the how and when. Ordering a British-made car and shipping it all the way to Arizona. Well, we'll cover that story, quite an amusing one in parts, in the very next episode. Thanks as always for tuning in. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, please. Do comment, love your comments, and subscribe down here somewhere if you haven't already. And of course, encourage others to watch my lunacy.